Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming today to this special Bruges Group meeting at the House of Commons. These are indeed most interesting times that we live in terms of Britain and the European Union. Discussions going on right at this moment on the UK, supposedly, what we thought, becoming an independent nation. Are things going as we hoped our leadership would be taking us? Are we actually becoming independent, or is it going to be jammed tomorrow? Is it going to be delayed? Is indeed our freedom from the European Union, this great empire, or certainly not great as in size, and of course damage that it causes, but when are we going to be freed? And is indeed the government handling these Brexit negotiations properly? Now, we have today with us a man who, back in the early 1990s, managed to help his country secede from another great multinational empire, again great only in size and the damage that it causes people. The Estonian approach, of course, wasn't one to follow the rules of the Soviet Union, their version of Article 50, Article 38, which believe. They said, we are being independent. And we see here before you a picture of those very discussions. Mikhail Gorbachev, the chairman of the Communist Party of the USSR and effective head of the Soviet Union, and of course the great man who's before us now, Igor Grazin, member of the Supreme Soviet at the time, was delivering the Estonian reaffirmation of their independence, saying this is how it's going to be. We are going to be independent from the USSR. And of course, Mikhail Gorbachev said, oh, have you thought about this? There's rules you must follow. There are procedures that we have to go through. Your way of doing things will destroy the USSR. And I don't think Mr. Grazin was particularly concerned about that. And we should not be concerned about the European Union. We need to be putting Britain's interests first. That's why we brought over the great man himself, Igor Grazin, a member of the European Parliament, who was born in 1952 in Tartu, one of the main cities of Estonia. He was a long-standing member of the Estonian Parliament, known as the, excuse my pronunciation, the Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, Riigikogu, that's fine.
Bless you.
Parliament sounds better.
Of course, one person who's been elected for many years and is a member of the Reform Party. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, was a member of the Supreme Soviet, sent by Estonia to reclaim their independence, their freedom, which was first won in the early 1920s until it was lost, taken by Russia or the Soviet Union in the 1940. And so, thank you very much for coming today, and thank you also for coming, so many of you, and of course Daniel Kaczynski, MP for Shrewsbury. We're very honoured as our guest. But without further ado, I'll hand you over to Mr. Igor Grazin.
Okay. Thank you. I stand up because I'm professor by profession, so I want to talk while standing. I like this picture today for two reasons. Number one, you see that once I had more hair, and another thing, this is a proof that I have a tie. By the way, a new one. I bought yesterday for you, and of course it was the first thing to forget it when I came to the airplane, so sorry. Now, I think that how I can express my admiration and respect to this house and to you, ladies and gentlemen, to these people, I think there is only one way to do that. It is to omit introduction and to go to the point immediately. So I consider myself being here as a witness, providing here a testimony to you about the events that really happened, that I was part of them to some extent, and I provide you with a testimony, a case regarding, let's say, slow, gentlemanly moving out of the unions. I do not mean trade unions, of course, I mean other unions. So what happened and how did it happen? My role in that, sorry that I start for myself, but a witness has to disclose the background, isn't it? So Till 1988 I was just normal average professor at Tartu University, but then started the events that were called Singing Revolution in Estonia in 1988. And in the course of events, as being a member of Popular Front of Estonia, I got elected to the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union, where I remained a permanent member till 1991. And it simply happened this way that chairman of my committee was then relatively unknown man, but he later became very popular, was Boris Yeltsin. So it is simply being a right man in the right place, or what. So after that I left politics, and after many rounds I'm back again. But the crucial point here is 1988, 1991, because it is a unique case, a huge empire, the global empire falls apart unexpectedly. I remember it was summer of 1990 when Mr. John Major visited Moscow and talked to us as well, and he insisted that Estonia is doing wrong things. Don't do that. Don't rock the boat. Gorbachev is a good man. You should not, because if you are Western-minded Estonians, you must understand, you must think globally and help Gorbachev, but not fight him. Perhaps even more famous for us was in July 1991 when George Bush Sr. came to the Soviet Union and delivered a speech where he said that the 21st century is going to be determined by the friendship and confrontation between the Soviet Union and the United States of America. And here is my hand of friendship, and I want Soviet Union to live forever, survive, etc., etc. And again, don't rock the boat. That, by the way, today it's very noteworthy. Where did he deliver that speech? Of all the places? In capital of Ukraine, in Kiev. And today it is known in history by the famous Kiev chicken speech. He said about confrontation between the Soviet Union determining the 21st century, it was just 3 weeks before the Soviet Union fell apart. So now, there in 1988, small Soviet country, Soviet Republic at that time, Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic, and movement here, movement there, but nobody very really thinking about regaining the independence. And by the way, about what was the scientific knowledge of that time. Marshall Goldman, famous Sovietologist, after that has said that the new slogan should be Sovietologists of the world unite, because they all failed in all their predictions. So today they are out of proper business consultants everywhere, but that was the situation. So 1988, winds of change, but I don't want to go into the romantic side of the politics, but there was one issue, and I think you can compare it to some situation in current Britain, I believe. There was one issue that really served as a spark that ignited the whole, I think even to some extent, forgotten national feelings. And that story was, to make, again, long story short, Soviet Union needed badly fertilizers, because it was all the time short of grain, buying it from Argentina, Australia, whatever, and it was strategic dependence. The only way to go up, you need fertilizers. Important component of the fertilizer was phosphorite. They looked in Moscow at the map and said, oops, there are huge reserves of phosphorites somewhere there, and it happened to be Estonia. So the risk was in reality there that Moscow will start to dig phosphorites that would have caused not environmental damage, it would cause simply death. Reason very simple. Our drinking water is very close to the surface. And if you dig the phosphorites, then the risk that you will perforate the layer is extremely high. Once it's contaminated, all Estonia plus half of the Latvia, no drinking water. And that was so evident, and it was so dangerous. Plus, of course, the risk of having about 5,000, it's a big number, 5,000 additional immigrants from the rest of the Soviet Union. as miners and all these kind of things. And this was the moment where really very many people, starting from some leaders of Communist Party of the Soviet Union, some dissident groups who were under the surveillance of KGB, they all started to think the same way. Wait a minute. Is that now this promised proletarian paradise? We knew that it's not the paradise, but are they thinking there in Moscow at all what's going on here? And then the game started. The Estonian leaders said, and the popular movement behind that, no phosphorite mining. Moscow insisting upon, don't you think about the future of Soviet economy, etc., etc. And after all, it's in the federal interest, so we still start to mine them. Estonians, no, we don't want them. And paradoxically enough, it went even through all the stages of Soviet, let me repeat it, Soviet court and legal system. It may sound funny, but it went through the legalistic steps. And the decision was, Estonian arguments are not sound, research does not prove the danger, etc. So we are going to dig and mine them. And then, actually, sorry for quoting myself, I put down a slogan that sounded, who has the last word after the last word has been said? Soviet constitution, and that's a pretty interesting difference from the European Union, had an article. David reminded, it was 38, I believe, or 39, sorry, I did not... there was an article that said that each Soviet republic has the right to secede. By the way, just one sentence. Soviet republic has the right to secede from Soviet Federation. Period. Nothing else. And then you start to think, excuse me, if we have the right to secede with all the stuff, the lands, factories, companies, people, resources, etc., we secede as a republic in its totality. Can't we secede in the question of phosphorites? So we leave all other things to you, Moscow, but we take our phosphorites out. Next step, the issue came, Moscow started to ask, and we started to consider that it was also a constitutional provision that said the Soviet Republic is a sovereign socialist state that has voluntarily joined the Soviet Federation. Okay, in the Baltic States case, it was not so voluntary, as you remember, and that has been confirmed by the Atlantic Charter. But no, anyway, let's put even that aside. But now there is issue. What is then sovereignty? This is something that I understand it is perhaps even foolish of me to talk about this in this place, because everybody knows, I believe, in Britain, who is sovereign and what does that mean. But it was not so very clear then. Because the story was, and here I see the déjà vu with Brussels. By the way, just in case, I was a member of group and political group, we did not want to join European Union, so actually we were not very much against, but at least we wanted to delay, but we failed. We are in. So, no, but anyway. So the same story. What is sovereignty? Oh, sovereignty is shared responsibility. This is for Moscow, this is for the Republic. Let's say financial system and central bank is Moscow, defense is Moscow, and then let's say textile industry and education is for the Republic, etc. So sovereignty is shared. So the question, who is going to dig phosphorites, is still iffy. And now comes the crucial point in all that further development. November 16th, 1988, the Soviet Supreme Soviet, issued declaration on sovereignty of Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic. And it said just one thing. Sovereignty means the supreme power over the given territory, period. Sovereignty cannot be shared, it cannot be alienated, it cannot be given away. And Estonia is going to exercise its supreme power through the principle of separation of powers. That separation of powers was introduced to avoid this Soviet thing, because Soviet ideology was that, not like the Commune in Paris in 1871, that all power to the Soviets, that they are executive, legislative, and all at the same time. So, introducing the principle of separation of powers, we broke away also from the Soviet system. But it came as a, let's say, appendix or additional bonus for that sovereignty declaration. No, it was adopted. But I'd like to point at one thing, and I firmly believe in it. Sovereignty is awfully important thing. You cannot negotiate it. You are sovereign or you are not. You cannot be a little bit pregnant whether you are or you are not. You are sovereign or you are not. And it can't be in no way that the president or chair or head of sovereign state is subordinate. Yes, we may have negotiations. We may talk about things. We may be nice. By the way, Gorby was and he is a very nice person. Mrs. Thatcher said it's a great guy and we can deal with him and great business, and no doubt about that. Having had both bosses, now Yeltsin closer, Yeltsin was pretty brutal. And he was not a nice person in that sense at all. By the way, he was not an alcoholic as well. I can testify that. So, well, he drank once in a while, but who doesn't? So Gorby was a nice man. But it's not about being nice. And when the talks about the sovereignty was, then there was one absolutely disarming sentence that Gorbachev said, you Estonians, why don't you love us? Okay, fine. This is not about love. It is about sovereignty, one and indivisible. So, and all the later developments started from that point. The principle was established. Even if Moscow tried to deny it, it went even so far that the Moscow Institute that granted me doctorate degree invited me to academic council and said that they are going to revoke my degree, that they will take that away. It sounded like Taras Bulba, you know. I give birth to you and I will take it away. I'll take it back. So we gave this, but there was again, like history is always funny. The problem was that Gorbachev's closest buddy was vice chairman of that academic council. So the issue was that I could say, sorry, you gave me that degree and you can take it away. I can survive without it because I had my employment job, etc., etc. But it was just academic dispute, sovereignty, sovereignty, sovereignty. And that determined all the further and other negotiations. It was a stated fact that perhaps we will not achieve everything and nothing will happen immediately and it will take. But it was possible to start to talk once the positions were clear. Later, a little bit later on, started another thing that needs to be pointed at. As I said, the Constitution had one sentence. Soviet Republic has the right to secede. Well, outrageous was to use this clause or to declare sovereignty, or actually to define what the sovereignty is. By the way, this definition, supreme power over the given territory, is nothing original. It's Jean Baudin, one of the founders of modern state theory, 400, 500 years ago. Simply the definition had been forgotten. So once that was stated, then the further things became slowly and slowly possible. Sadistic trick, by the way. Declaration of sovereignty was declared when Gorbachev was on his visit to India. It happened Friday night. So Saturday, Sunday, Declaration of Sovereignty of Estonia. And journalists, New York Times, Boston Globe, pretty much whoever, the Tribune, calling to Gorbachev, what do you think about the events in Estonia? Gorbachev didn't have the slightest clue what was going on. But self-confident and charmer, as he always was, and still is, he said, well, Estonia is our flagman ship of perestroika. Whatever they do, etc., etc. And one Monday morning, he discovered, oops, 2 press conferences in the presence of President of India were made. So he could not, and actually last time when we talked to Gorbachev, it was by telephone in America in 1994, simply it was, no, it happened this way that we talked over the telephone, and he pretty honestly said that with that dating of that sovereignty, you were just swines, be honest, Igor. I said, well, that's how history works. So, but no bad feelings anymore, of course, because everything worked out fine. Now, perhaps to wrap up this moment that I'd be more than happy to answer the questions, is that talking, negotiations, arguments are very, not easy, but they are relatively convenient if the positions are clear and non-negotiable. That you do not compromise them. Actually, it does not need even bravery or courage. It is simply a little bit of heart and a little bit of brains. And then it works out. And after that, it is easy. And as I said, once we had declared that, Gorbachev one moment said, okay, fine, no decision is there, and we discussed here with other comrades, and no, okay, and sovereignty, and so on. Later, we declared independence from the Soviet Union. Soviet Union was still there. No independence, then independence. Lithuania did the same thing. But what started then was Moscow started to introduce legislation about procedure of secession. So, there must be a transitional period for 2 or 3 years. After that, there will be separation, a little bit of money and stuff like that. Then we will calculate assets and liabilities mutually and stuff like that. And first we went along with it. But being lawyers and politicians at the same time and knowing the tricks, we realized that it is a trap. That once you go into these details, you may be finished. To use it where the substance is replaced by procedure, then the substance doesn't matter anymore. Because it was clear that we are going to negotiate this moving out forever. Arguments, experts, witnesses, what not. So that was the trapping. That was not discovered immediately. But once it was discovered, then the Moscow side started to exploit it. Let's go into technicality. Oh, what do you mean? What's the Estonian budget? And what are the principles? Do we need international auditors for the assets and stuff like that? We said, no, okay, wait a minute. Let's declare first the thing. We are we, and you are you. And we are separate. If that is clear, then after that, we will see. And one, perhaps, a really last argument. I know that it is the Brexit case as well, etc., economic interests. That separation from the Union will be economically harmful, and it will cause damage. The famous Clinton-esque saying, its economy is stupid. Coming from a Marxist country, I understand where this ideology comes from. And no doubt about that. Economy matters. Prices matter, and our lives. They matter. But they definitely matter much less than we think. Estonian independence, or the Soviet budget and industry, was about 70% of its own GDP. We had military factories, we had industrial investments from the Soviet Union, etc. And they said, but you are going to lose all these businesses and these things. Our answer perhaps was not very smart, but it turned out to be true. We are going to survive, comrades. We are going to survive. And don't ask how. Our survival in an independent country is our business. We are very thankful for your concerns, but we accept it just as friendly advice and nothing more. This statement by me is perhaps too religious or whatever, but you know, having been through all these turmoils, etc., you know, I became much more of a person who relies upon faith than God. Let's take the step, and the things will work out. And if we don't have exact blueprint or plan, does not mean that it is not doable or must not be done. After all, the strongest, the biggest, the most influential planning organization was the State Plan Committee of the Soviet Union, and we see now the outcome. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go over to some questions now, but it was a very reading speech, Mr. Grazin. And of course, we need to just remember that Estonia is a country of a little over 1 million people in a union of 200 million, whereas Britain is 200 million. And of course, Britain is of course a country of 60 million and probably quite a few more as well as time goes on. We should be able to, I think, be a little bit more robust. But that's my opinion as the chairman of the meeting. The first question will be from Mr. Mark Lipniewski.
Professor, thank you for that very erudite and interesting exposition. The Estonian people, like many other peoples within the old Soviet Empire, was subjected to a terrible policy known as population transfer policy.
True.
The Crimean Tatars and so on, all these people were forcibly deported. What are your thoughts about this new policy, shall we say, call it the Soros plan or the Merkel plan, of transferring entire populations from the Middle East into Europe? What are your thoughts on that?
First, let's put it this way. Of course, we are also in that immigration plan system.
Yes.
And we never said no to it. We completely agreed to it. And we have to admit 15 immigrants in 5 years. We can manage that. So instead of going into all these but this is a small country's problem. We are ethnically, or for 700 years, we were part of Germany. Then we were part of Russia, etc., etc. So we try to avoid some kind of a confrontation. But now my personal belief is that it was an error of historical magnitude. By the way, Attila the Hun did not move to new territories in 1 or 2 years, and it was not by Roman immigration authorities why Attila the Hun came in. So it is a tectonic issue. Another thing was, perhaps it was a problem in waiting. Sooner or later that might have happened, but I think that the principle of forced or actually really accelerated immigration, to my mind, it was wrong. But it has to be seen in a combination, because slowly that migration had been going on in the southern Europe for years. And how much of that is a corrupt relationship between border authorities down there, etc., it's another issue. Because immigration and moving the people, it has become a big business and it's very dirty. So in all combination, but we survived the Soviet rule to some extent. We are going to survive that, but yes, I think it was mistaken. It's too late to correct, I believe. We can't undo that anymore.
Mr. Vic Webb.
Okay, thank you, Professor. If I didn't misunderstand you, you said you rely more on faith than on God. How do we sell that to the British public when trying to get out of the European Union, when so much is made of the apparent economic problems?
I think it's there are two aspects of it. One aspect is a pure business calculation, and it is about the books, it is about assets and liabilities, numbers and stuff like that. The life has shown that the books are not reliable, and all these calculations, pluses and minuses, are not correct. The fact that we had 70% of the Soviet one and did not have almost any national industry or economy significant was absolutely correct. It came from the statistics, and more or less reliable statistics, confirmed, by the way, by CIA when George Bush came to tell how we have to keep. But it worked out. I understand that you are not satisfied with my answer. I believe in fate. I've been fatalist in Lermontov's sense. And I quoted to gentlemen today, I understand that perhaps it's not the best place to quote Napoleon, but who said, "Get in fight and we shall see."
But you've had one advantage, and you still do, and that is that you're quite happy to trade with a small bloc. Sweden, Finland, for example, just those blocks, and you can do very nicely. And I think Estonia has done the best of all countries that have left the European Union. Soviet Union, sorry.
Yeah. By the way, that European was not such a great fault, by the way. We were, and today are, net recipients from the European Union. We get money from there, and that's why we feel sorry if you guys are leaving. But on another side, we would have lost that money in 2 years anyway, because your money was so well spent that our GDP is so high that we are now on another side. So we are not going to receive anything from European cohesion funds in the next budgetary period.
So it's really a massive liability, not a wonderful market.
There is one even more interesting thing. Do we really believe that European market works? Think about all these governmental things, government-controlled transportation, just all these regulations. Simply the fact that European Union legislation has a specialist chapter that, to my mind, is even grammatically funny. European Union policies in the plural. There may be policy, but that we have fisheries policy. This is, by the way, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. But simply it did not work out. So please learn from our experience. Perhaps you will do better. Yes.
David Banks of Veterans for Britain. David, who, just for audiences to know, is of course achieved marvellous things on exposing how Britain has been signing up to this EU military union. But if, David, if I please ask a question.
Thanks. So I was just wondering if you could explain some of the parallels with what we've seen and Estonia's experience. What we have going out the door of the European Union is the European Commission trying to grab hold of UK defence policy while we're leaving. And also they've got the assistance of our own apparatchiks in doing so.
You use the right word, apparatchiks. Exactly. I think that this confrontation and conflict within the European is between the peoples and the apparatchiks, and the apparatchiks are the nation in its own right. Now about the military aspect. I do not think that, I'm just representative of one party in in Estonian parliament. But generally, to be honest, we truly rely, we hope, and we rely upon NATO. And that NATO is crucial. And it includes the key element, it is a British-American axis that is awfully important for us. We rarely feel ourselves more or less not safe, as you can be safe next to such a neighbor, simply because we have additional NATO forces in. It means starting from the Americans with all these phantom, and by the way, RAF, exercising there, and in Denmark, Danish and pilots, and plus ground troops, tanks and stuff like that. This is a small one, but it is a principal one. And this is NATO. And we've repeated over and over again, NATO is key to our defense. To be honest, NATO has also its procedural problems once in a while. But to believe that Juncker type of guys are going to lead any defense, excuse me, you haven't seen Russian generals. I truly do not believe in it. If it has symbolic value, why not? But this is in a certain way substitute activity. We are not able to manage a federal Europe. Let's then try military. Perhaps that will work out and keep our apparatchiks positions. But you can go also in playwriting or whatever. So they are just looking for next justification because, economically and philosophically, it is a failure. Yes.
Dr. Gerard Conway.
Thank you for the speech. I want to ask you about the attitude of Estonia today in its foreign policy. I think small countries seem to be cautious in their foreign policy in general. And is Estonia, does it still retain a kind of independent spirit, or is it inclined to go along with, say, the dominant group in the EU or Germany? Or
We do not have any, let's say, dominant or allies. But fundamentally, it has been said, and I repeat what we've said. We said for all these years, there is the most important country in military defense. That's United States. The well-being of United States military depends upon traditional British-American relationship. If something goes between you guys, we are in trouble. So try to keep this alliance as strong as possible, because this is how we are going to survive. Now you said, oh, we're frightened and afraid. Well, actually, not really. But we'd not like a single soldier to leave Estonian territory. Estonia is one of those few countries that we pay in full 2% for NATO of GDP, as the charter requires. That are not very many of them. It's 2% plus, because we started to build at our own budgetary means the military infrastructure. No, in other words, barracks, roads, all the canteens and all these kinds. So the NATO will not spend a single penny on that. It is our budget. This is 2% plus a little bit. Is that enough? I don't know. But at least we can say, we've did our best. And there's nobody. Our soldiers are in Afghanistan. They are in Syria. We were in Iraq. So we participated in all missions. And of course it doesn't make much of a difference for the world. But we can say, you can never say, why didn't you defend yourself? Why are you asking for our assistance? And we can say, we did more than most. And that's it. Yes.
Thank you. Alex Neuver, then Dr. Carl-Hunter. Alex.
Yes, thank you. It was very, very fascinating insight actually into Estonian tradition and succession from the USSR in 1991. My question was going to be on, obviously we're seeing increasing dissatisfaction across much of Eastern Europe, particularly Hungary with Viktor Orban. We've seen recently the Italian elections, some very fierce skeptic parties gain majorly there. Do you think that it's likely that in the next few years there may be other real successionist movements within countries, particularly in Eastern Europe, perhaps also Italy, towards other, Polexit or Italexit or whatever neopopulism you want to use, but the succession movements from the EU developing there? Do you think that's realistic?
I should say it this way, that the whole East European bloc that is called Visegrad Group, it's Poland, Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, etc. Austria, for that matter, have serious problems with the EU as it is. And the fundamental difference is that what the EU leadership does not see as a danger ahead, it is a danger that we put behind us. And whatever we think about, and let's say legal reforms in Poland, or the Fidesz system in Hungary, etc., when European Commission comes together and says, you Poles are not right to do that, and then Hungarians, you are making a mistake here or there, or Austrians, you almost elected the wrong president. The East European answer to that is, who are you to tell us our ways? And if you, the old Europeans out there, are turning slightly senile, then we, the young, raising nation, just enjoying just being ourselves, being funny, merry, positive, etc. We don't want that. We've seen that. It's Franz Kafka. Yeah. It's there. And that is why, now comes my personal opinion. Yes, there is a rise of new opposition. Whatever these people are there and what are the specific goals, it is a fact that the European Commission tries to avoid. Number one, labeling. What is common to Perussuomalaiset, or that's true Finns, and Fidesz, and about Poland, etc.? What unifies them? They are all labeled as nationalists and fascists. Jörg Haider, who was one of the greatest Austrian statesmen at that time, was called as neo-Nazi. And we all understand, and people of our and the older generation, that it is so false as thing can be, because it means that they even don't know what fascism is or was. But they are using the label to blame. The result is, the new opposition, and I should say that like about those people who are next to us in Finland, etc., they are not anti-European. They are pro-European. And wanting to be European means to get rid of this European Union. Whatever is that title, or it doesn't matter. We Europeans are all, I understand, we are all together. We have common history, heritage, what not? But this does not mean us that we are the subject of these comrades there.
If I make this come back, I often use an analogy when I think of the migrant situation, which is now upon Europe, and the analogy I use is that of a ship. And a ship, of course, at least in modern times, has bulkheads, by which I mean watertight compartments within it, so that if there's a breach in the external hull, then that water that comes into the ship will be contained within one of those bulkheads. If those bulkheads don't exist, if those partitions don't exist, then the water will flood the whole ship and sink the ship. But if it is contained within one area, it will prevent that ship from sinking. Now, of course, with Schengen in Europe, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing free movement across Europe. So once migrants from Africa, from elsewhere, enter into Europe en masse, they can then move freely throughout Europe. They can get a passport in another EU jurisdiction where it's more easy to come to get a passport and come to the UK or come to other EU. So that is the problem that we're seeing. So cannot it not then be argued that actually it benefits everyone collectively, that in fact having borders is not a nativist reaction, it is actually something that benefits the whole of Europe collectively, because having those internal borders protects everybody.
Exactly. I'm completely right, but there are two positive moments. It is sorry for this comparison, it is what makes us similarly a little bit safer. You have Channel, and we have a terrible weather. and most legal and illegal immigrants of Estonia who have come to Estonia, they have left because it is impossible to survive. Darkness, cold, and let's say not awfully nice people, let's put it this way, or friendly people, or somehow. So basically they tend to go away in a certain thing. But I truly accept that. But do not forget there is one optical illusion that we sometimes we fall victims of. European Union likes to speak about them as Europe. And these are two different things. They have grasped the right to speak on the behalf of Europe. We know. Fine. If you know, no. Leave us alone of your knowledge. Let me remind you one thing where European Commission actually vandalized the principles of Europeanism was, what did Hungary do actually? Why they became fascists overnight and stuff like that? They erected the first borders. They kept the immigration flow out there, and then they were said they are nationalists, they are racist, they are this and that. Look how they violate the human rights. Who was silent? Right, Austria. Because Austria was next to them. And Austria took time to build up their own border control. So in a certain way, I think that in this situation, any additional, it sounds bad, but any additional policing, whether it is on the streets or on the borders, etc., I think it's favorable. It's gone too far, and these guys are running too loose around. And simply, we are not able to keep that all going. And the first question was that mistake? Yes, to my mind, it was. We cannot correct and we can't undo that. But we can think about for the future. How far is the danger? Strangely enough, the borders of southern Italy and Greece, etc., they were not as protected as we thought. And strange enough, border is one of the things that in Estonia it works. Not for understandable reasons. If that doesn't work, then it's bad. But we were asked to contribute to defense and protection of southern border 1 year ago. We were absolutely sure that everything's okay and we are contributing. But now it is discovered that why internal borders is southern borders were non-existent till very recently. So I think you are right. But I'm in favor of policing, unfortunately.
I think not everybody has the same luxury we do of having the English Channel armoured. And like yourselves, obviously, I mean, we've experienced a little bit of what you have, and certainly in terms of leather. Russia's been affecting us weather-wise recently, and potentially in other ways. But of course, I mean, like Israel, when you're surrounded by people who
your situation much worse.
Your interests at heart.
Yeah. I understand that. Yeah.
Daniel Kaczynski, MP, then Dr. Cutler.
Well, I just wanted to make a couple of points, if that's all right. And
yes,
can I just say what an inspiration you have been, and I wish we had more of those type of speeches on the floor of the House of Commons. It's a great pleasure, privilege to listen to you. I'm the first ever Polish-born British Member of Parliament. So I was born in Warsaw, and like you, I've experienced what life was like under communism. And I think the thing that you said, which is so important, is that sovereignty cannot be compromised in any way. And those people who want to somehow blunt Brexit talk about a cliff edge. Now, a cliff edge is a very emotive phrase, isn't it? If you're on the edge of a cliff and you're looking down, you're going to be rather frightened as to what happens if you go over that cliff edge. And it's a very emotive, evocative term. And yet what our esteemed speaker has said is that we mustn't compromise on our sovereignty. And I think he alluded to the fact that perhaps we should become an independent sovereign nation first, and then negotiate, as an independent sovereign nation, the terms of the new relationship we have with the European Union. We are already starting to see, and I'm going to a meeting of the European Research Group this evening to discuss this, but we are already seeing the start of infringements of our sovereignty, whether it's to do with fishing off our coasts and also free movement of people. The British people voted to stop the free movement of people in March 2019. We are now being told, apparently, we're going to have to allow this to continue for another 2 years. Those are violations and infringements on our sovereignty. I met with a group of Polish students the other day from leading Polish universities, and I asked them, how much do you think that we have given the European Union since we joined? And most of them thought that we'd given them about £20 billion. They were astounded when I told them that according to the House of Commons Library, the British taxpayers have handed over £462 billion since we joined. A country that saved half of Europe after the Second World War. We're an extremely generous nation. I can understand why Germany, for historic reasons, has a duty and a responsibility to help some of these countries. But why is it that Britain is handing over so much money to these countries when I can take you to schools in my constituency that have leaking roofs and poor insulation, and I can take you to my hospital at the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital where there are queues for beds? How is it conceivable that we continue to hand over all of this money? And I will end, Mr. Chairman, by saying this. I have a genuine concern that Germany is dominating the European Union. And there is a move towards the creation of a supranational state with a single currency, a single European army, and a single foreign policy. When we leave, they will bludgeon those countries that have not got the euro yet into getting the euro, and my former country, Poland, will be one of those. There is only one country with a permanent opt-out from the eurozone, and that is Denmark. And once they finish with Poland and the others, they will go to Copenhagen and will say, that opt-out that you thought you had, think again. Yeah. So a single currency, single army, and a single foreign policy. And that is a very, very dangerous entity. And I couldn't agree with you more, sir, when you said about the disputes that Poland is coming under and the interference. A nation elects its government. A nation elects its president. And the people elect those representatives. And yet the EU Commission, foreign bureaucrats in another country, who the hell do these people think they are? To try to overturn the democratic decisions of the politicians who are directly accountable to the people who voted for them. I'm just very grateful that we're pulling out of the European Union, and I pay tribute to people like you who have had the courage and vision to fight for your sovereignty and independence, and we very much have to follow suit. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. And facing you, I try to face all your constituents and people. The generosity of UK is known, and the only thing what I can say that at least in Estonia it was money more or less well spent. So we are out of that position that we will be the donors 2 years later. So no, it has. But when you pay visit to Estonia or any other country, I can show you around many construction sites or the bridges, etc., that lead nowhere, that are plain, stupid constructions and directions. Thanks God they have European flag on it, so you understand where this comes from. But that is one of professors of mine who once told, he was billionaire himself, he said that the quality of money is not determined by its amount, but for what it is spent. In reality, yes, we all have to pay Euro taxes and we contribute that, and we received more than we gave. But let us think, what is the money that we have to give up? It is the salaries of the teachers. It is a social network. It is these things. We give away live money. And we receive the money with strings attached, particularly they like concrete. All kind of these kind of stuff, and then you can put the flag on it and determine how. So it is a stupid money to a very large extent that is not free for us to spend. So I can't agree with you more. So that's how it is. You're right. Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Carl Hunter, who is one of our leading industrialists and in the export drive that's happened since the referendum, been achieving some very great things for this country. Your question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your very kind. I'm not worthy of those comments in the slightest. Professor, that was absolutely extraordinary, and I thank you so much for inspiring us and reminding us of the importance of the nation state. And thank you also, sir, for saying so much that hasn't been said as often as it should be. I just wondered whether you in Estonia had experienced after independence what we seem to have experienced curiously since our referendum, when we have so many of our own citizens now proclaiming a duality of citizenship in regard to the European Union, and indeed that sometimes they see that being a European citizen is more important than being a British one. I wondered, and I find it remarkable if the answer is yes, how many Estonians proclaimed Soviet citizenship is more important than Estonian on their independence.
There is no Soviet citizenship anymore, but there is a significant number of people that you saw here, I believe, to the Russian embassy in London, who queued to vote for Putin, or presidential election this Sunday. So we had the lines to the Russian embassy as well. So they must be Russian citizens, not Soviet ones. And there is a portion, roughly 25% of the Estonian population is non-Estonian, and mainly they are Russians, but also Ukrainians, etc., etc. Of them, of this Russian population, about 1/3 are Estonian citizens. They speak Estonian, and even if they don't, they truly feel themselves as Europeans in the best, I repeat, in the best sense of the word. My Russian students in the university, who goes to do what? Well, somebody comes to Oxford and somebody goes there. They will not go to Moscow anymore. So, but there is one trick, as you asked about it. Russians have done a very interesting thing. They are ready to grant Russian citizenship to whoever wants and who applies for it. But can you see the danger? It is this Sudetenland Deutsche. These are our national. There is a special term, compatriots, that Russia has to defend all the Russians in the world. Question is, who are those Russians whom they defend? Russian citizens. But I must say, it has become a minority. There are very few people among them, it's significant number, who really want to go to Russia. And after all, they may be very Russian and even former Soviet, but European realities have changed them. They are Westerners in their mind. They yell, oh, that's not democratic. For goodness sake, Soviet people did not know what's democracy. Oh, this is interference in independent judiciary. Oh, wait a minute, this is not from Soviet ideology. So they are different, and it will sort out. We live with each other, and of course there are some day-to-day naggings and sayings, and where there isn't.
Thank you.
Yes.
Edward Farmer.
Question on trade. Where has your trade, since decoupling from the Soviet Union, where is your trade? Is it been primarily Europe, or has it been global, and how do you see your position now in terms of trade?
Our main trading partner is Finland and Sweden. Then the export place, of course, is Germany, and this is where do we sell. On another side, we buy almost everything. There are very few things that we really produce, but they are quote-unquote high-end technological things. It is IT. We still do not have enough people to produce that. Just a couple of examples. There is a company, Playtech. Playtech produces practically all the software for Las Vegas gambling machines, for instance. Yes, okay, Playtech. And look at all these outsources, etc., etc. It's developing. It's the people who produce surplus value in reality. Because a small country, no natural resources, no nothing. We do not have oil to sell. There was a very prosaic and non-romantic Minister of Finance of Estonia about 20 years ago. And he said that we are a very small country, no resources. We are made of sand and salty water and swamps. That the only resource we have are Estonians. Period. And case closed. And of course there are issues of paper mills new to come in with new technologies and all this kind. Yes, these are all discussions and the environmental concerns itself. But we truly understand that if we want to make our living, then it is the only way. And there is no other way out. If you do not use your brains, then case closed.
Gentlemen.
Mr. Charles, thank you for having me. And thank you all for having me. My name's Michael Lightsfoot, and I'm from a group that's just formed in January called Artists for Brexit. We're having a bit of press and things, so it's going reasonably well, though we need support. Mr. Grazin, thank you so much for your talk. It's
Thank you.
really, really, really inspiring.
Thank you.
And I'd be fascinated to know, well, let me put it like this. We're Artists for Brexit, and really, I mean, we arose out of just artists that were a bit concerned about how things were going, with Brexit, but also in a wider sense, we're rather concerned that there doesn't seem to be any representation of Brexit in a positive light within the culture. Artists are not making paintings, and musicians are not making songs, and so on. We think that that's necessary. We don't know quite how to do that. But we're working on it. Jan here is making some wonderful stuff, by the way, so you should check that out. Jan Bowman here. She's made some wonderful illustrations for us. Could I just ask you, Mr. Grazin, with the Estonian experience, could you say something about how your artists, your writers, your musicians, what sort of responses they made, what sort of work they made to support what happened in your country when you got independent?
As a matter of fact, the driving force of Estonian independence were so-called the Union of Unions that united the Union of Artists, the Union of Writers, the Union of Journalists, the Union of Composers. So they were the driving intellectual force who started that. And by the way, the same case was with Russia. If you start, by the way, my first period in the Supreme Soviet, there were poet Robert Rozdestensky, then all these ballet artists, Raimond Pauls, composer, etc. Andrei Sakharov, after all, physician, professor, etc., etc. So they were the driving force of freedom and independence. But now comes a paradox. To quote one of my friends who is a conductor, he said, Igor, have you ever noticed that all the orchestra conductors are left-wing and all the solo pianists are right-wing? I said, very interesting. He said, no, example, Herbert von Karajan, noble family, etc., but extremely left. So, on the other side, Mstislav Rostropovich, cello player, on the right wing. And the answer was very simple. Orchestra conductor needs somebody to pay for the instruments and the suits for the orchestra members. Paradoxically enough, this can be done only by the centralized state. Let me say a couple of good words about the Soviet past. Every third-rate district city had symphony. Every second-rate city had a philharmonic theater with ballet troupe. But But the same, by the way, in Germany during Hitler. And Stalin, by the way, knew very well that these things are important, and he paid and gave them a position in the society. Now imagine there's a free market economy. What do we have today? It is sponsorship, donors, competitions, etc., etc. So, no, strange enough, the poet who fought for the freedom has now the freedom. What means nobody publishes him anymore. There is no state-sponsored publishing houses anymore. There is no obligation to do that. So it is a paradox. In Estonian case, let's put it this way, Estonia generally is right-wing country. As one of Estonian presidents once said, that Hillary Clinton would have need to create a new party in Estonia because there is no such a left-wing party that would house her. But having said that, you are awfully right. Those who succeed are the authors of bestsellers, pop culture, whatever we call, awfully successful musicians once in a while. No, National Symphony is such a pride, but it comes from the state budget. So objectively, there is no answer to your question. It is hard that free market does not support art and culture as much as it is needed. The only way out is what at least we have tried to say. There are certain things in life, like music, drama, ballet, that money can't buy. They will get money, whatever it costs, and even if there are 3 people in the theater must be kept. But it is very hard to do that. And we failed many, many times.
Could I just quickly ask, so I mean the Soviets were notorious for their art of
Hero of ballet.
Stalin stepping out and helping the people and
Yeah.
all that stuff. So with Estonia, do you have any sort of comparable painting or
Yes.
expressions of nationhood and so on?
Mm-hmm.
Post-Soviet era.
Yes. Okay, let's start from the composers. Arvo Pärt, for instance.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
No problems, okay? And then we can follow up with these type of things. But of course, it has to be kept in mind that to be a cultural leader today, or to create, it is hard. Money is scarce. But on another side, what helps us as Estonia, but generally, is the Scandinavian tradition. Scandinavian design, Scandinavian artists related to industries, this 1% of the rule that 1% of every construction has to go for their art, and all this. No, yes, we try to do maximum. But no, it is a very painful question. I do not have answer that will make you happy.
Well, thank you anyway.
Oh, yes, song. Thank you. Song festivals. 80,000 people sing. Well, it is a little bit strange, but that's true. 80,000 people sing at the same time. Where do they come from? These are communities, local business people, etc. Somebody puts his free time, etc. Where these costumes, where they come from? Yeah. Actually, the state supports a little bit, but it is a collective, private enterprise. And this is the soil where other things come up, all this musical culture stuff.
Very interesting, thank you.
Yeah. Song festival, thank you.
Professor Grazin, I understand that your independence revolution began with known as the singing revolution.
Yeah, oh yeah, very good example. Singing revolution, why? It happened to be the more or less regular rock music festival where tens of thousands of people and youth came to one and the same place. And once the official program was over, they refused to go away. They started to sing the things, and that singing lasted, well, it sounds a little bit like insane, but that's true. That singing with shifts lasted for 5-6 more days. And composer Mustonen wrote new anthem for freedoms, and it was sang, and so on. These all things combined together, that is why we are called singing revolution, and the positive side of it. In all that caused, not a single blue eye, not a single droplet of blood not a single victim.
Yeah.
That was 2 weeks later when 2 persons drank themselves to death. But it is not the direct cause and event. So it was bloodless, singing, positive, merry.
Well, so we've got a bit of work to do here.
Yeah, but it's not easy, I admit that. Sorry.
On the art point, if I may very briefly, I understand that in Estonia, in its first period of independence, that was preceded by an awakening of Estonian literature, Estonian poetry, of Estonian, and then from there they understood Estonian nationhood, at which point later they were willing to fight for their freedoms from the German and Russian control.
Yes, but it started, I said, the main igniting point was this so-called Phosphorite War. When the composer, by the way, the first song later to go to the song festival, it was about one district where these mines were designed to be. And the song's title was Not a Single County is Alone. And it was the song of solidarity of the whole Estonia with one county. And that's how it started slowly to move in that direction. The same with Russia. Russian democratic movement started from idea to turn back, absolutely stupid Communist Party's idea to turn around the great Siberian rivers. Don't ask me how it had to work, but the idea was that it is absolutely useless that Siberian river flow to the north. They have to flow to the south, where the climate is better. And they started that design in a certain way. And that was when the Writers' Union of Soviet Union, and they rose up on that back place. What are you doing, guys? So green movement was important for artists.
Thank you. The lady at the back has been very patient.
I'm a journalist, currently based in Germany, where I come from. I was born in Ukraine, in the Soviet Union, actually. My name is Ellen. And some of my friends were killed by Russian soldiers. We have currently the war between Russia and Ukraine. And as a blacklisted journalist, I cannot visit my relatives in Crimea, which is currently occupied. And I write from time to time about Russia. And I keep asking myself and my readers, what is wrong with this country? And the question to everybody is, what is to your mind the real reason of the escalation of the conflict between Great Britain and Russia? Would you say that it is the last events in London? Or maybe it has started a long time ago, before we all have noticed it, before the journalists, my colleagues, have started writing about it? Thank you.
Actually, number one, I started during a question. I reminded myself that I'm a member of parliament, so we're still kind of official. So it means that I do not have any rights to interfere into ongoing investigations. It's executive privilege, and it would be absolutely inappropriate on my side to comment upon investigation going on in this country. And as a lawyer, no comments on that at all. But you asked what's wrong with Russia. It's a very interesting question. Herzen, Dobrolyubov, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky asked the question, what's wrong with Russia? It was 150 years ago, they could not answer. But I've tried to answer my personal speculations, being half Russian myself. I thought about that. And I think that every nation has certain talents and mission in the world. Perhaps it's again a little bit God-orientated statement, but that is. Perhaps the new frontiers, it's for Americans. Philosophy is for Germans. And every nation has a talent to do that. And actually, I think that one of the greatest achievements of Great Britain and contributions to the world civilization has been British Empire. Think about that. That this little piece of City of London, what it has done to the rest of the world, and the talent of political administration, it is a natural talent. Russians are absolutely great. Music, literature, eternal Russian soul searching. Their eternal understanding and sense of mission, lack of material selfishness. So they really think, and they are sincere, honest, but they always fail. where they start to build their own state. All the great Russian politicians were the bad guys. Peter the Great was a mass murderer and maniac. Alexander the First introduced the secret police, and on another side, Alexander the Second, who liberated the Serbs, was considered to be, he was assassinated, by the way, as most of these people. So, to my mind, there is something missing in Russian soul that is needed to create normal parliament, for instance, or normal independence, because that attitude. Remember what I said about Gorbachev. Why don't you love us? So the love has become a metaphysical, political category. You say sovereignty, he says love. We are missing the point to communicate to each other. And there is a moment when we must try to, not to justify, but at least to understand. There are, I believe, millions of Russians, and I saw some of them in New York a couple of days, etc., really Russian liberals, etc., where they sincerely believe that they have to fulfill a mission. So what can be our answer? We are happy. Fulfill the mission, but not in our country. So search your own soul. We'll find ours ourselves. So it sounds very apologetic, but you ask emotional question, how can I answer more precisely? There is no one clear answer.
Maybe someone else would also like to, would also have to say something about that. Like, when did it actually start, the conflict between the Russian Federation and Great Britain? Because now we're all my colleagues around the globe are writing that there is the escalation of this international conflict. But had it started last week?
Oh, well, it's very hard to comment on that. I have to be honest. I've been out of internet for a couple of days because I flew over the ocean and here and back and forth, etc., etc. If you say the British-Russian relations have been bumpy all the time, on one side, Britain and Russia had a very good relations in 1921-92 when the British expedition corps left and the Soviets were legally recognized. So there was alliance during the World War II, etc., etc. So it has always been this way. But on another side, there have been always the negative sides of it, because in Russian Soviet terminology, there is a term that is something is ultimately bad. This is not, let's say, Nazi, fascist. Yes, that's of course. But the standard accusation is British imperialism. So whoever was accused of homosexuality or whatever, he was always in ideology British imperialist, whereas Germans were much closer. But it is a standard ideology. So what now happened, how much it is escalation, I don't know. Once again, I do not know the circumstances of the case, so I don't want to comment on that. But no, that's it. What can I say about that? It has always been relation that includes certain tension. Sometimes higher, sometimes smaller. Let's say being in the middle, I would say, there can...
It could be envy.
Well, Nicholas II was relative, and then he tried to escape to Britain, but he was shot. So these relations between monarchs and so on were different.
Well, the British Empire, I mean, we're spread around the world, or have been. Maybe Russia had an envy that we achieved this.
Yes and no. You put me in a certain way in a strange position. I need to. Okay, strategically, and Russians have the right to think this way. Russia is a huge continental country that is vulnerable and always has been vulnerable from the West. It has been Germans, Poles, etc., but other way around as well, Napoleon including Hitler, etc., etc. So it has been so for centuries, particularly confrontation between Russia and Poland. So what Russia has done in the history, they have moved their borders farther from the heartland of Russia. It is like if you are a tennis player and you are on the recipient side, then compare it that you move net farther from you to get the longer distance. This is exactly what Russia has done. And difference between Soviets and Russians was Russians who occupied the countries like Finland, Poland, etc., and in this Middle Asia, they never replaced administrations. Finland was an Archduchy of Finland, and Nicholas II was Archduke of Finland. But Finland was Polish kingdom within Russian Empire. All the Khans in Asia, only one condition. You have to be militarily loyal to us. Why St. Petersburg and Finland was conquered? Finland is the same climate we are. Swamps, dark and gloomy people. Why? Only one reason. To keep Swedes farther away. And that was all the sense what it made. So in a certain way, it was like ethnic or whatever, but at the same time strategic expansion. Get away the notion from Americans that they are great Atlantic power or the marine power. In the same way, Russia is great continental power. Our position with Russians is fundamental in this way. Russians want to be us, part of their sphere of interests. We want to be as far away as we can from any interest. Sometimes we wish that they would forget about our existence. We are so small.
Can I just, there's something
Well,
very...
no, the gentleman in the hat.
Thank you. Professor, I returned to Canada to what message do you want me to bear and to spread to my friends there?
In Canada?
Yes.
Okay. Now I have to remind you that I'm not speaking as an Estonian, but I'm speaking to you as a former US university professor who has been in the heart of Medicaid and Medicare discussion in America and seen that all. I don't want to be patronizing, but you ask yourself, so sorry, you provoke. You know, please believe in free market. Free market works always, sooner or later. And free market with one addition, human face. If you substitute it by state, medical system, whatever, etc., you have simply to wait until it fails. What I can guarantee you, it is going to fail. It doesn't mean that Americans know how the Medicaid should work. Obamacare, it's disaster. It is disaster. So, believe in free market. Is that all?
It's a start.
Okay, good.
Judy.
Hi, can I bring up the subject of sovereignty again? From a general point of view, many grassroots Brexiteers believe that sovereignty is about people having the power and that they give their power to the Queen or whoever. And we're now in a situation where that sovereignty has been taken away from us, or in theory, and given to the EU. How do you feel about sovereignty
Yes.
based in people?
In theory, you are absolutely right. The utmost sovereignty can be taken away. It has been granted to the people. But what means people's sovereignty in practical reality? It means the right of the people to come to the streets and decide its future. Look what's going on in Catalan in Spain. So now the issue is really state establishment versus the will of the people. Now the rhetoric question is whether we truly want our societies to be ruled from the streets on daily basis. Singing revolution, by the way, this was a great disappointment for us. Singing revolution, new songs, new symphonies, etc. But you know, to run the revenue collecting agency, you have to look at the numbers. Singing alone is not enough. And the president of the bank need not be a very good composer, but he must be damned good in numbers. So now the question is, and it comes from ancient Greek, how much time do people need to spend on making and being involved in politics? Generally, I should say that we have to do normal things. We must raise kids and bake bread and build houses, etc. Just instead of thinking on day-to-day basis about sovereignty and then what we are going to do, we are forced into that, to my mind, absolutely abnormal situation. That on the level of pubs and it is the thing we are thinking about every day. This is not normalcy. Normalcy is music, love, sex, beer, and these things.
But we have a big grounding in the Magna Carta and ancient laws that permeates through everything, as well as everyday life.
No, that's it. You know, from that picture that was here, I can say, you know, revolution and walking out from the Soviet Union, it was a great time. It's the best time in my life. But it would have been completely wasted time to dedicate all your life to getting sovereign. I think sovereignty is a means. And people's will has somehow to be employed. So there must be some apparatus. But Karl Marx, Londoner, who said that who is the first danger of the victorious proletariat, he was thinking. Okay, forget about proletariat, but the answer was correct. Who is the first enemy of victorious proletariat? His own accountants and bureaucrats. It was said in 1848. To some extent, he was right.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Grazin, for this incredible talk that you've given us, and thank you all for having so many distinguished people come. We now have some members of the media who would like to interview you. But I'd also like to give my thanks also to Andrew Rosendale, MP, who has kindly given us this room today, and of course Chris Muspratt, who's there for all his help with arranging this event at the heart of what hopefully will be the heart of Britain's democracy once again in a free United Kingdom. I'm sure Professor Grazin will be happy to speak to you afterwards once he's completed his interviews. But thank you for coming to our country. Thank you for reminding many people in Britain's Parliament about how freedom and sovereignty are, of course, the most important things. From there, everything else follows. And I think the government should be remembering these, or learning this very valuable lesson at this time when, of course, we are trying to negotiate back something that should automatically be belonging to us. So Professor Grazin, thank you. Thank you very much.
It has been true honor, and with all my respect, thank you. And thanks to all British people that have stood next to us all these years. United Kingdom never ever recognized Soviet occupation. We had embassy here next to the Hyde Park. All these years, we are awfully thankful to you. And whatever happens with the Brexit, you must remember, I think, one very important thing. You've already done European Union better. We already breathe more freely just because you guys are out there. Thank you.